They were living fossils of a different way of being human, preserving in their daily lives what the wealthy were beginning to leave behind. As candles became more affordable and rooms more private, as books became more accessible and nighttime, socializing more common among the upper classes, the nobles were slowly training their bodies away from segmented sleep. But below stairs in the servants' quarters, the drafty lofts and cold corners where laborers made their beds, the old ways persisted. It's not by choice, but by necessity. This is what makes their story worth telling. In the forgotten sleep schedules of Tudor servants, we find a bridge between ancient human patterns and modern disruption. We find people caught between natural rhythms and economic demands, between what their bodies wanted and what their circumstances required. As we move deeper into their world, as we follow them through their days and nights, remember this: what seems strange or difficult about their sleep patterns to us would have seemed equally strange in reverse to them. The idea of sleeping through the entire night, ignoring the natural waking period, forcing the body to maintain unconsciousness for 8 or 9 consecutive hours, this would have struck a Tudor servant as unnatural, or perhaps even unhealthy. The darkness is falling now, across centuries and continents. The servants are preparing for rest, and we're about to discover exactly what that rest looked like, felt like, sounded like, in a world that moved to a different rhythm entirely. Let's walk through the servants' entrance, now not the grand front doors with their carved oak and iron fittings, but the narrow side entrance, worn smooth by countless passages, leading to the working heart of the manor. This is where our story truly begins. In the spaces between grandeur and survival, a Tudor manor house was less a single building than an ecosystem, a complex organism requiring constant attention to remain alive. And that attention came from an intricate hierarchy of servants, each with specific roles, each essential to the functioning of the whole. Understanding these roles helps us understand why sleep became such a precious, fragmented thing. At the top of the servant hierarchy stood the steward, a man of some education and considerable responsibility. He managed the estate's finances, oversaw the other servants, ensured his lord's wishes were carried out with efficiency and discretion. The steward might have his own small chamber, a degree of privacy unusual among servants. His sleep, while still governed by duty, was more his own than that of those beneath him. Below the steward came a cascade of specialized positions. The chamberlain managed the private quarters and linens. The butler oversaw the butter, and not butter, as you might think, but beverages, particularly wine and ale. The cook commanded the kitchen with the authority of a general, ruling over undercooks, scullions, and kitchen boys. Each of these positions came with particular sleeping arrangements and schedules. Then there were the personal servants, ladies' maids, valets, pages, who attended directly to the family members. These servants lived in closest proximity to their masters, sometimes sleeping on pallets at the foot of their lord's or lady's bed, ready to respond to needs in the night. Their sleep was perhaps the most interrupted of all, caught between their own exhaustion and the unpredictable requirements of the nobility. Outdoors, but no less important, worked the stable hands, gardeners, and farm laborers attached to the estate. They lived by different rhythms: earlier risings, tied to animal care and agricultural demands, but also sometimes earlier retirements when daylight failed and their work could no longer continue. The lowest positions were occupied by young scullery, maids, kitchen boys, and general laborers' children, really, often no more than 10 or 12 years old, sent from poor families to work in exchange for food and basic shelter. Their days began before anyone else's and ended after everyone had retired. Their sleeping spaces were wherever room could be found: a corner of the kitchen floor near the dying hearth, a loft above the stables, a shared pallet with 3 or 4 others in a cramped garret. What unified all these different servants was the physical environment they inhabited: a world of stone and timber, of cold and draft, of smoke and shadow. Let's linger here for a moment, because understanding their physical reality helps us understand why their sleep took the form it did. Tudor manor houses were built for durability and defense, not comfort. Stone walls kept the structure standing through centuries, but they also held cold, like a vessel holds water. In winter, That cold seeped into everything: clothes, bedding, bones. Servants learned to sleep in layers, wearing much of what they'd worn during the day, curling into tight balls to preserve warmth. The floors were often bare stone or packed earth covered with rushes. Plants cut and laid down to provide a small amount of insulation and to catch spills and debris. These rushes were changed irregularly, sometimes holding months of accumulated household detritus. Walking through the servants' areas meant crunching through dried herbs and less pleasant materials, releasing scents both aromatic and foul. Hearths provided the main source of heat, but maintaining them was constant work. A fire that went out overnight meant struggling in the cold morning to relight it, meant explanations to displeased masters, meant work that should have been completed quickly, extending into frustration. So someone had to tend the fires through the night, not constantly, but periodically, rising during that natural midnight waking to add logs, to ensure the embers stayed alive. The lighting situation shaped everything. Candles were expensive made, from tallow animal fat or beeswax, both requiring resources and labor to produce. Servants used them sparingly, if at all. More common were rushlight threads soaked in fat held in simple metal holders. These gave off a weak, flickering light, barely enough to navigate a corridor, certainly not enough to work by for any detailed task. So when darkness came, it really came. The servants' world shrank to what could be felt by touch, navigated by memory. Corridors they'd walked 100 times in daylight became obstacle courses in the dark. The worn familiarity of stone, walls under fingertips, the particular creak of a certain floorboard, the smell of the kitchen or stables, these became navigational aids in a world without light switches. Their clothing was simple, practical, made to endure repeated wear and rough treatment. Men wore wool tunics and hose, leather jerkins for rough work. Women wore long dresses of coarse linen or wool, aprons to protect the dress during work, simple coifs covering their hair. At night, they might remove outer layers, but not much else. The concept of specialized sleepwear was a luxury they couldn't afford. Your bedclothes were essentially your day clothes minus whatever was most uncomfortable or restrictive. Personal possessions were few. Servant might own a spare shirt, a needle and thread, perhaps a small religious item, a wooden cross, a cheap medallion of a saint. These meager belongings would be kept in a simple wooden chest if they were lucky, or wrapped in cloth and tucked under a sleeping pallet if they weren't. The absence of stuff, of the accumulated material goods that fill our lives, meant a different relationship with space and privacy. Privacy itself was nearly non-existent for most servants. They shared sleeping quarters, worked in constant proximity. Two others performed bodily functions in communal areas. The idea of having time alone, space that was entirely yours, would have seemed fantastical. And this collective living shaped sleep in important ways: the sounds of others breathing, snoring, coughing, the warmth of shared body heat in winter, the disturbances when one person's schedule required them to rise while others still slept. Yet within this crowded, cold, uncomfortable environment, servants created small pockets of humanity. They formed friendships, alliances, even romances. They told stories to pass the time during long work sessions. They celebrated small victories: a meal better than usual, a kind word from the master, an afternoon when the work seemed less crushing than normal. And they protected their sleep fiercely, knowing it was the only true rest they'd get. A servant who could fall asleep quickly, who could snatch rest in brief moments, who could rise from deep sleep to immediate alertness. These were valuable skills, cultivated through necessity. The daily schedule varied by season and by specific role, but certain patterns held true. Most servants rose before the household, sometimes well before dawn, particularly in summer when early light and agricultural demands required it. They prepared the manor for the day, fires built up, water hauled, privies attended to, bread started, animals fed. By the time the master and mistress woke, the house should already be warm, functional. Welcoming throughout the day, waves of work would crest and fall. Meal preparations brought intense activity to the kitchen. The Lord's comings and goings required servants to attend. Special events, a guest's arrival, a hunt, a feast could throw the entire schedule into chaos. But between these peaks came valleys, where a servant might sit for a few moments, might steal a brief nap in some quiet corner if they dared, might at least let their body rest, even as their hands continued some automatic task. Evening brought its own demands. Fires needed building up for the night. Clothes needed brushing and setting out for the next day. Doors needed securing. Candles needed snuffing. And then finally, when the household settled into sleep, the servants could seek their own rest. But as we've learned, that rest wouldn't be simple or continuous. It would be woven through with responsibilities, shaped by the architectural realities of where they slept. Influenced by the bodies and sounds of others around them, their sleep was communal, fragmented, precious, and strange by our standards. In understanding who these servants were and where they lived, we begin to see how impossible it would have been for them to sleep the way we do. The very structure of their lives that demands the environment. The lack of control over their own time meant that sleep became something adaptive, something negotiated with necessity. And now, with this understanding in place, we can follow them more closely through their days, watching how the endless cycle of duty shaped every hour, including those supposedly given over to rest. Dawn hasn't quite broken, but Sarah is already awake. She's 15 years old, a scullery maid in a modest but respectable manor house in Norfolk. Around her, 3 other servants share the small loft space above the kitchen. The warmth from below makes it one of the better sleeping spots in the house. Though the smell of old grease and smoke permeates everything, Sarah's first sleep ended perhaps an hour ago. She woke as she always does, without real understanding of why, and lay still for a time in the darkness, listening to the breathing of the others, feeling the cold air on her face while the rest of her body stayed cocooned in the shared woolen blankets. During this waking time, she said a quiet prayer, something her mother taught her before she came into service at age 10. She thought about the day ahead, mentally walking through her duties like counting beads on a rosary. Now she's rising for her second sleep to end, careful not to disturb the others. Her body knows before her mind does, knows the pre-dawn cold, knows what needs to be done, knows there's no point in lingering. She climbs down the ladder from the loft, her bare feet finding each rung by practiced memory. In the kitchen below, the embers in the great hearth still glow faintly. She'll build those up first. This is how the day begins for the lowest tier of servants. Not with an alarm clock's violence, but with this slow emergence from sleep. This yielding to duty that's been woven into their bodies through years of repetition. Let's follow Sarah through her morning. Then branch out to see how other servants structure their days, and understand how these duties made uninterrupted sleep an impossible luxury. The hearth fire requires immediate attention. Sarah adds kindling first, small twigs and wood shavings saved from the day before. She blows gently on the embers, coaxing them back to life. The smoke makes her eyes water, a sensation so familiar she barely notices it anymore. Once the kindling catches, she adds larger pieces of wood, building the fire in careful layers. This single task might take 15 minutes, maybe 20 if the wood is damp. But it's essential. The entire household relies on this fire for cooking, for warmth. It's for hot water. While the fire builds, Sarah fetches water. This means several trips outside to the well carrying heavy wooden buckets, her breath making clouds in the cold pre-dawn air. The well is perhaps 50 yards from the kitchen entrance, close enough to be convenient, far enough to make the task laborious when repeated. The water is shockingly cold, drawn from deep underground. She fills the large pots that sit permanently near the hearth, ensuring there will be hot water available when the household wakes. By the time Sarah finishes these tasks, the first gray light is showing through the kitchen's small windows. Other servants are stirring now. Thomas, the stable hand, passes through on his way out to tend the horses they need feeding and watering before anyone else starts their day. Margaret, the upper maid, descends from her own sleeping space to begin preparing the mistress's chamber for morning. The cook arrives. Next to an older woman named Eleanor, who commands the kitchen with stern efficiency. Eleanor doesn't sleep in the manor itself, but in a cottage nearby, a privilege of her position. But her day begins as early as anyone's. Under her direction, The kitchen begins its transformation from cold, silent space to the roaring, steaming center of household activity. Bread dough that was prepared the night before and left to rise overnight now gets shaped into loaves. Sarah's hands are coated in flour, kneading and forming. The repetitive motion is almost meditative: push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. Around her, other preparations proceed. Porridge for the servants' breakfast. More elaborate fare for the master's table. This is the critical thing. To understand, the household operates on overlapping schedules, and servants exist to smooth those transitions. While the family sleeps, servants must be awake, preparing. While the family eats, servants must be working, serving. While the family enjoys leisure, servants must be cleaning, mending, maintaining. Let's shift perspective now to William, a page serving the master of the house. William's duties are quite different from Sarah's, but they impose their own demands on his sleep. William sleeps in a small room, adjacent to the master's chamber, not quite a closet, but not much larger. His pallet is thin but private, a luxury that recognizes his closer proximity to the family. His day begins when the master wakes, which might be at dawn or might be later, depending on the season and the master's inclinations. But William's sleep is frequently interrupted during the night itself. If the master wakes and requires something assistance to the privy, a drink of water, help relighting a candle, William must be available. So his sleep exists in a state of perpetual half-alertness. One ear always listening for the sound of movement from the next room. His body trained to wake and respond quickly. During the day, William's duties involve personal service. He helps the master dress, assists with correspondence, runs messages to other parts of the manor or to nearby estates. He serves at meals, standing attentively behind his master's chair, refilling cups, retrieving items as needed. He accompanies the master on rides or inspections of the property. These duties don't follow a strict schedule. They flow according to the master's needs and whims. So William's rest periods are unpredictable. He might have 2 hours free in the afternoon, or he might be constantly occupied from dawn to long after sunset. This unpredictability makes structured sleep even more difficult. His body can't establish firm rhythms when his schedule changes daily. In the stables, meanwhile, Thomas is working through his own carefully timed routine. Horses demand attention at specific intervals. They need feeding at dawn, grooming before they're ridden, exercise, watering throughout the day. The stable must be kept reasonably clean. Mucking out stalls is daily work, and not light work either. Thomas's sleep schedule aligns more with the animals than with human convenience. He rises very early, often before even the scullery maids, because horses don't care that it's still dark. They're ready to eat when they wake, and leaving them hungry and restless creates problems that ripple through the entire day. But Thomas also has a small advantage. Once the morning care is complete, he sometimes gets a brief period of rest. If the horses aren't needed immediately, if no urgent repairs require attention, he can retreat to his quarters aloft above the stables and sleep for an hour or two. This daytime nap helps compensate for his truncated night sleep. The pattern becomes clear. Every servant's sleep is shaped by their specific duties, but all share a common experience of fragmentation. None of them control their own schedules. None can simply decide to sleep until they feel rested. Their rest is rationed by necessity, stolen in margins, protected fiercely when it arrives. Seasonal changes intensify these challenges. In summer, when daylight stretches long, the workday expands with it. Gardens need tending, harvests need bringing in, longer days mean more time, the household is active and requiring service. Servants might work from 4 in the morning until 10 at night, with only brief rest periods in between. Winter contracts the workday. In some ways, agricultural work pauses, outdoor duties diminish, but it expands it in others. Keeping fires burning becomes a constant task. The cold makes everything harder, slower. Ice and snow create new challenges past that must be cleared, animals that need extra care, drafts that must be sealed. Feast days and special occasions obliterate any semblance of regular schedule. When the household hosts, guests, servants work around the clock, tables must be set and reset. Dishes multiply exponentially. Bedchambers need preparing for visitors. The extra work might continue for days, with servants surviving on snatched moments of sleep. Their bodies push to exhaustion. And then there are the emergency duties, the tasks that wake servants in the deep of night. A fire in a bedchamber. A child's illness requiring help. A storm that damages the roof and sends rain pouring in. These events are unpredictable, but not infrequent. And they mean that even when servants are supposedly free to rest, they remain on a kind of unconscious alert. Ready to respond if needed? Consider Jane a lady's maid, whose sleep is perhaps the most interrupted of all. Jane sleeps in her lady's chamber, on a small pallet at the foot of the grand bed. Her purpose is immediate availability. If her lady wakes uncomfortable, Jane adjusts pillows. If her lady needs assistance to the chamber pot, Jane provides it. If her lady cannot sleep and wants conversation, Jane must stay awake, listening, responding appropriately. During the day, Jane dresses her lady, arranges her hair, helps her with correspondence and needlework. She maintains her lady's wardrobe, mending tears, brushing away dirt, ensuring everything is in perfect condition. She's also expected to be something between a servant and a companion, close enough to be trusted with secrets, subordinate enough to never forget her place. Jane's sleep pattern is purely reactive. She sleeps when her lady sleeps, wakes when her lady wakes, and endures the interruptions between. In return, she occupies a relatively privileged position among servants better fed, better clothed, protected from the very hardest physical labor. But the price is constant availability, surrender of any autonomous rest. As the day progresses through afternoon toward evening, the cycle of duties continues. The household takes its main meal in the middle of the day, a substantial dinner that requires hours of preparation and generates mountains of dishes to clean. Servants eat separately, quickly, often consuming the leftovers and simpler fare while the family enjoys roasted meats and elaborate preparations. After dinner comes a different kind of work maintenance, tasks that keep the manor functioning. Clothes need mending, stores need organizing, candles need making, floors need sweeping. These tasks fill the afternoon hours, performed in the same spaces that will, come evening, transform into sleeping quarters. As darkness approaches, the manor begins its slow wind down toward night. Fires are built up for evening. Candles are lit sparingly. The master and mistress retire to the solar or great hall for evening relaxation, and the servants begin the final push toward their own rest. But bedtime for servants doesn't mean immediate sleep. Final tasks remain ensuring the household is secure, banking fires so they'll last the night, completing any duties the family requires before retiring. Only when all this is done can servants finally seek their own pallets, their own hard-won rest. And even then, as we know, that rest will be interrupted by the natural waking of segmented sleep, by duties that can't wait for morning, by cold, discomfort, the sounds of others, the thousand small disruptions of communal living. The servant's day is a wheel that never stops turning, and sleep is not an escape from that wheel, but merely a spoke within it, arriving on schedule and departing again just as inevitably. Their bodies have adapted to this reality, learning to find rest in fragments, to wake instantly when needed, to push through exhaustion because there's no alternative, as full darkness settles over the manor now. As the servants finally lie down in their various spaces, we can begin to look more closely at where and how they sleep, because the physical spaces of rest tell their own story. One of ingenuity in making do, of bodies learning to find comfort where little exists. The word bedroom suggests something specific, a dedicated space, private, designed for sleep, a room whose primary purpose is rest. But for Tudor servants, such spaces were rare luxuries, privileges granted to only the highest positions in the household. Hierarchy. Let's explore now the reality of where servants actually slept, understanding that these spaces shaped not just where, but how they rested. The physical environment of sleep, its temperature, its privacy, its comfort or lack thereof, profoundly influence the fragmented patterns we've been tracing. We'll start in the kitchen loft, where we left Sarah earlier. This space above the main kitchen is perhaps 12 feet long and 8 feet wide, with a sloping roof that follows the line of the building. The ceiling is so low that you can't stand upright except at the very center. For servants share this space, Sarah and another scullery maid, an undercook. And a kitchen boy, their beds are simple pallet cloth sacks filled with straw or wool scraps if they're lucky, laid directly on the wooden floor. Each person has one woolen blanket, coarse and scratchy, but warming. In winter, they share blankets, huddling close for warmth. In summer, they sometimes sleep without any covering. Suffering through the heat that rises from the kitchen below, the air here is always thick with smoke and cooking smells. Even at night when the fires are banked low, the walls are wooden planks with visible gaps where winter wind whistles through. There's no window. Ventilation comes through a small opening near the roof peak. It's barely large enough to admit light. But this loft has one crucial advantage: heat. The kitchen fire directly below warms the space far better than most servants experience. On winter nights, when frost coats the inside of windows elsewhere in the manor, the kitchen loft remains tolerable. Sarah and her companions know they're fortunate in this regard, even as they endure the smoke and smells. Down one corridor, in a space that's not quite a room, we find another sleeping arrangement. This is where two serving men rest older male servants who handle various general duties. Their sleeping space is essentially an alcove in a stone corridor. Separated from the main passage by a heavy woolen curtain hung from hooks, the curtain provides psychological privacy more than actual barrier sound passes freely through it. And anyone walking the corridor at night brushes against it. Each man has a slightly thicker pallet than the kitchen staff, stuffed with straw that rustles loudly whenever they shift position. They have proper blankets, still wool, but less coarse, probably passed down from the family's own bedding when it became too worn for their standards. The stone walls here hold cold like a cellar holds wine. Even with the curtain drawn and both men's body heat, the temperature hovers near freezing on winter nights. They sleep in most of their day clothes, wool, tunics, thick hose, even leather caps pulled down over their ears. The stone floor radiates cold upward through their thin pallets, making the straw insulation essential. Interestingly, this corridor location means they hear everything: footsteps passing in the night, voices from adjacent rooms, the sounds of the manor settling. This exposure to sound might seem like a disadvantage for sleep, but there's an argument that it served a purpose. In a world without alarm clocks, having your sleep naturally interrupted by the sounds of others rising ensured you didn't oversleep and miss your duties in the stables. Thomas's sleeping space tells yet another story. The loft above the horse stalls is accessible by a wooden ladder, opening into a space fragrant with hay and horse. The smell is strong manure, animal sweat, leather, the sweet dustiness of dried grass. But Thomas doesn't mind. He's slept here since he was 11 years old, and the smell means home to him now. His bed is genuinely comfortable. By servant stands a deep pile of hay covered with a canvas cloth with 2 wool blankets that are almost new. The hay provides both cushioning and insulation. He can add to it or refresh it any time, since he works with hay daily. The horses below provide substantial heat. Their large bodies generate warmth that rises through the wooden floor, creating a temperature that's almost pleasant even in midwinter. The downside is that horses are noisy at night. They shift, stomp, occasionally whinny or snort. But again, Thomas is adapted to this. The sounds are familiar, even comforting. What would wake others merely registers in his sleeping mind as normal, requiring no alert. There's a small opening in the loft wall that he can shutter closed in winter or leave open in summer. On warm nights, he sometimes lies awake after his first sleep, looking out at the stars through this opening, listening to the night sounds of the countryside: owls hunting, foxes calling, the wind in the trees. These are moments of genuine peace, stolen from the constant demands of labor. For William, the page, his sleeping space represents a higher level of privilege, but also a different kind of constraint. His small room adjacent to the master's chamber has an actual door, thin wood, but a real door with hinges and a latch. The room is barely large enough for his narrow bed and a small chest for his belongings. His bed has a wooden frame that lifts the mattress off the floor. The mattress is thin, but actual mattress, stuffed with wool, not merely a pallet. He has a proper pillow and 2 blankets. A tiny window with shutters provides light and air. By servant standards, this is luxury. But the price of this relative comfort is constant vigilance. William must remain alert to sounds from the master's chamber. His sleep exists in a perpetual state of light readiness, never descending into the deepest restoration because his unconscious mind maintains a listening post. This is psychologically exhausting in ways that physical labor isn't the inability to fully surrender to rest, even when rest is possible. Now let's visit perhaps the most challenging sleeping arrangement, the servants' dormitory in one of the manor's garrets. This long, low space under the eaves houses the largest concentration of servants, various maids, kitchen help, younger pages, and boys in service. Perhaps 10 or 12 people share this space, which is essentially the entire top floor of one wing of the house. The ceiling follows the roofline, creating a space that's tallest in the middle and slopes down to perhaps 3 feet on either side. Pallets line both walls, leaving a narrow walking space down the center. Each person's sleeping area is marked more by custom than any physical boundary, roughly 4 feet of width, enough for a pallet and perhaps a small bundle of possessions. Privacy is completely absent here. Everyone hears everyone else breathing, snoring, coughing, the rustling of straw, the intimate sounds of bodies in sleep. In winter, everyone suffers the cold together. In summer, the heat under the roof becomes stifling, the air close and difficult to breathe. But this communal arrangement creates its own social dynamics. Friendships form. People learn to coordinate their schedules, to move quietly when others are sleeping, to share blankets and body warmth. Stories and gossip are exchanged in whispered conversations during the midnight waking period. The dormitory becomes a community, not just a sleeping space. Young Mary, a 13-year-old girl in her first year of service, finds comfort in the presence of others. Sleeping alone would terrify her at the darkness. The strange sounds of the manor, the loneliness of being far from her family's cottage. But here, surrounded by other servants, she feels safer. When she wakes frightened in the night, she can hear the breathing of the others and know she's not alone. The coldest sleeping spaces belong to those few servants who sleep in truly marginal locations. Robert, a young stable boy, sometimes sleeps in an empty horse stall when the loft is too cold, or when he's simply too exhausted to climb the ladder. He piles straw deep and burrows into it like an animal, the smell of horse everywhere. His dreams populated with the shifting sounds of the animals around him. Agnes, a scullery made even lower in the hierarchy than Sarah, sometimes sleeps on the kitchen floor itself, near the hearth. After working so late that climbing to the loft seems impossible, she lies on the stone, covered by her single thin blanket. The dying fire a few feet away, providing just enough heat to make sleep possible. She wakes early, before the cook arrives. To avoid being scolded for laziness, these marginal sleeping spaces represent the absolute bottom of the servant hierarchy, people so tired, so lacking in status, so desperate for rest that they simply collapse wherever warmth and minimal safety coincide. The bedding materials themselves are worth understanding. Straw was the most common stuffing for servant pallets, cheap, available, and reasonably effective at providing cushioning and insulation. But straw had drawbacks. It broke down quickly, becoming compacted and less effective. It harbored fleas and other insects. It needed regular replacement. Wool scraps were better, but more expensive. Some servants might supplement their straw pallets with gathered wools, Tolan bits from the household's wool processing, or wool gleaned from hedges where sheep had brushed past, leaving tufts behind. A pallet with goodwill content was a treasure, maintaining its loft better, providing superior insulation. The blankets most servants used were coarse wool, woven from the roughest fibers, often undyed. They were scratchy against bare skin, but they retained warmth even when damp, critical in the constantly humid English climate. A servant might own 1 blanket, maybe 2, if fortunate. These blankets were used, repaired, used again, until they literally fell apart. then sometimes cut up and used as patches for other blankets, or as stuffing for pallets. The very wealthiest. Servants, the steward. Perhaps the cook, the chamberlain might have feather mattresses, or at least feather pillows. Feathers were luxury items, but worn-out feathered bedding from the family's chambers eventually migrated downward through the hierarchy, ending up in the hands of upper servants. These represented significant upgrades in comfort, making sleep genuinely more restful. Temperature control was primitive and challenging. Servants couldn't simply adjust a thermostat. In winter, you wore more clothes to bed and hoped your sleeping space retained enough heat from the day's fires. You huddled close to others. You might warm stones in the fire and wrap them in cloth, placing them at your feet for temporary warmth, but these cooled within an hour or two, leaving you no better off for the rest of the night. In summer, the problem reversed. Stone buildings held heat during the day and released it slowly at night, meaning sleeping spaces stayed warm well past dark. Wooden-roofed spaces like garrets became ovens, trapping the day's heat. Servants would open shutters and doors to encourage any breeze, but on still summer nights, sleep became a sweaty, uncomfortable struggle against heat exhaustion. Vermin were constant companions in servants' sleeping spaces. Fleas lived in the straw of pallets, breeding happily in the warm environment close to human bodies. Mice and rats moved freely through the manor, particularly in areas where food was stored or prepared. It wasn't uncommon to wake with a mouse running across your blanket, or to hear rats fighting over scraps in the walls. Servants developed a kind of philosophical acceptance about vermin. You couldn't eliminate them, you could only minimize them through cleanliness and vigilance. Pallets were taken outside and beaten regularly, the straw exposed to sun and air to reduce flea populations. Cats were welcomed in sleeping spaces, their predation helping control rodents even if they're nighttime. Hunting made noise. Despite all these challenges, the cold, the discomfort, the lack of privacy, the vermin servants found ways to make their sleeping spaces feel personal. A small religious token hung on the wall. A bundle of herbs tucked under a pallet to improve the smell. A smooth stone carried from home, kept for its sentimental value. These tiny personalizations transformed Anonymous sleeping spaces into something closer to home. And there's something remarkable in this. How humans create rest. Create peace. Create something approaching comfort even in difficult circumstances. The servants' sleeping spaces were not designed for their well-being. They were afterthoughts, spaces left over after the important parts of the house were allocated. Yet servants adapted, found warmth, found community, found rest as we lie in our own beds now. With climate control and privacy and mattresses designed by sleep scientists, perhaps we can appreciate how different the experience of rest once was. And yet, for all the differences, the human need for sleep remained constant. The bodies lying on those straw pallets were the same bodies we inhabit, same need for rest, same vulnerabilities, same capacity to adapt. The manor is settling now into deep night. The servants have found their various sleeping spaces, and as they drift into their first sleep, we can begin to explore what that sleep actually felt like, how it progressed through its stages. What happened during those mysterious hours when Tudor England closed its eyes? The last candle has been snuffed. The last footstep has faded down the corridor. The manor house settles into darkness with a series of small sounds, timber creaking as it releases the day's warmth. A distant dog barking once and falling silent. The soft whisper of wind against shuttered windows. Sarah lies on her pallet in the kitchen loft. 3 other servants arranged around her in the darkness. Her eyes are open, though there's nothing to see. The darkness here is complete, velvety, almost tangible. She can hear the breathing of the others, not yet slowed into sleep's deeper rhythms. Everyone's still in that transitional state between waking and rest. Her body aches in the familiar way it aches every night. Her hands are raw from washing dishes in water that was scalding hot and then freezing cold, repeated endlessly through the day. Her back protests from bending over the hearth, from carrying water, from the constant physical labor that defines her existence. But these aches are normal, even comforting in their familiarity. They're evidence of work done, of duties fulfilled. She runs through tomorrow in her Minda habit so ingrained, She doesn't realize she's doing it. The fire to build, the water to fetch, the bread to help prepare, the endless dishes, the floors to sweep. The same tasks she performed today, will perform tomorrow, has performed every day since she can remember. The predictability is somehow soothing. And then, without marking the exact moment of transition, she's asleep. This descent into first sleep happens naturally, organically, as darkness and exhaustion combine. There's no resistance in it, no lying awake worrying or planning. The body simply claims what it needs. Within minutes of lying down, most servants slip into sleep, their consciousness receding like a tide going out. The first sleep is deep. This is when the body does its most intensive restoration, work repairing muscle tissue damaged by the day's labor, processing the food eaten during the day, filing away memories, and consolidating what was learned. Brain waves slow into delta patterns, the deepest form of sleep, where consciousness barely exists at all. In this state, Sarah is profoundly vulnerable and profoundly at peace simultaneously. She doesn't dream much during the first sleep. It's too deep for the vivid narratives that characterize REM sleep. Instead, if any mental activity occurs, it's abstract, formless. It's more sensation than story. The other servants around her have entered their own first sleep at roughly the same time. Their breathing synchronizes unconsciously, the communal nature of the space creating subtle coordination. In the stable loft, Thomas sleeps with one hand trailing off his haybed, his breathing deep and regular. In the corridor alcove, the two serving men sleep back to back for warmth, their bodies sharing heat despite the stone cold radiating from the walls. Time passes. In the deep sleep state, time becomes meaningless. An hour might feel like minutes, or like eternity. There's no awareness of duration, no checking of clocks, no wondering how long until morning. Just the pure state of biological restoration, the body doing what bodies have done since humans. First slept in caves and trees, but the first sleep doesn't last all night. It can't, not in the Tudor pattern of rest. After perhaps 3 or 4 hours, sometime around midnight or 1 in the morning, something shifts. Sarah's sleep begins to lighten. Not drastically at first, just a gradual rising from the deepest delta waves towards shallower stages. Her breathing changes slightly, becoming less deep, more variable. Her body shifts position on the pallet, unconsciously seeking a more comfortable arrangement. And then, without external stimulus, without any apparent reason, her eyes open. She's awake. But it's a strange kind of waking, not the jarring alert of being startled from sleep. It's not the groggy confusion of waking before you're ready. Instead, it's a calm, gentle waking, as natural as the sleep that preceded it. Her mind is clear but quiet, not racing with thoughts or anxieties. She lies still, aware of the darkness, aware of the sounds of the manor, aware of her own body, but not uncomfortable. This is the midnight waking, the period between first and second sleep, and it's one of the most fascinating aspects of Tudor servant sleep patterns. Sarah doesn't get up immediately. There's no rush, no panic about being awake in the middle of the night. She simply lies there, experiencing a kind of consciousness that modern people rarely access, a state between sleep and waking. Deeply restful, despite the awareness. Her mind wanders gently, touching on thoughts without grasping them firmly. She thinks about home, about her mother, about whether the weather will be good tomorrow. But these thoughts drift past like clouds, not demanding engagement. Around her, the other servants are experiencing their own versions of this midnight waking. The timing isn't perfectly synchronized. One might wake 15 minutes before another, but within a rough window. All of them transition from first sleep into this alert period. This is when small tasks happen, when necessary duties intrude on rest. Margaret, one of the other maids, sits up carefully, wraps her blanket around her shoulders, and descends the loft ladder. She moves through the dark kitchen by touch and memory, finding the hearth. The fire has burned down to embers, glowing faintly red in the darkness. She adds several logs, positioning them carefully to catch without smothering the coals. The fire is her responsibility tonight, her rotating duty among the kitchen staff, and she tends it during her midnight waking. ensuring warmth and cooking capability will be available come dawn. In the stables, Thomas also wakes in this natural midnight window. He lies still for a moment, listening. The horses are quiet, making only small movements in their stalls below. He can hear one horse drinking from its water trough. The liquid sounds clear in the night silence. He considers whether he needs to check on them, but decides they're fine. Instead, he says a prayer, the same prayer he says every night during this waking time. Taught to him by the previous stable master, words about protection and blessing that he doesn't fully understand, repeats faithfully. Some servants use this time for more personal needs. The chamber pot kept in the corner of the dormitory sees use during these midnight hours. Bodies that have been sleeping for several hours often need relief. There's no embarrassment about this, no awkwardness. It's simply bodily reality, managed matter-of-factly in the darkness. Others use the time for emotional connection. In the dormitory, two young maids whisper together during their midnight waking. They're sisters, separated from their family's farm, and these quiet conversations in the night are their way of maintaining their bond. They talk about nothing important memories of home, small observations about the household, gentle complaints about the work. The darkness makes it intimate, safe, space where honesty feels possible. Some servants, particularly those who are deeply religious, use this time for extended prayer. In an era when devotion was not just expected but central to identity, tonight the midnight waking offered an opportunity for spiritual contemplation. Without distractions, without the demands of duty, the mind could turn toward God with particular focus. There are records from this era of religious manuals specifically discussing prayer practices after the first sleep, suggesting this was a recognized and valued time for devotion. William, lying in his small room adjacent to his master's chamber, wakes during his first sleep and immediately enters a state of alert listening. Is his master stirring? Does he need assistance? William lies perfectly still, breathing quietly, his ears straining for any sound from the next room. But there's nothing. His master is still deeply asleep, snoring softly. William relaxes slightly, though he doesn't allow himself to fully let go of vigilance. He thinks about the day's events, replaying a moment when he stumbled while serving wine, nearly spilling it. His cheeks burn in the darkness with remembered embarrassment. He runs through better ways he could have handled the situation, mentally rehearsing for next time. The duration of this midnight waking varies. Some servants remain alert for only 20 minutes or so. Others stay in this liminal state for an hour or even two. There's no rush to return to sleep, no anxiety about lost rest. The body seems to know how much waking time it needs, how much contemplative space serves its purposes. And here's what's remarkable. Modern sleep science has discovered that this pattern, waking naturally in the middle of the night and remaining quietly alert for a period, isn't actually disruptive to rest. The midnight waking period, when approached without stress or concern, provides a form of restoration different from sleep itself. It allows the body to shift position, reducing pressure points that might otherwise cause discomfort. It allows the mind to process thoughts and emotions in a state of reduced anxiety, without the defensive mechanisms that operate during full wakefulness. Servants didn't know the science, of course, but their bodies knew. Their experience taught them that waking in the night was normal, not a problem to be solved. And this acceptance made the waking restful rather than stressful. Gradually, as the midnight period extends, the servants begin to feel the pull back towards sleep. It's not dramatic, just a gentle heaviness in the eyelids, a slight slowing of thoughts, a subtle shift in consciousness. They settle back into their pallets, adjusting their positions slightly, pulling blankets closer, and then, as naturally as they woke, they slip back into sleep. This transition into second sleep is usually easier, quicker, than the initial descent into first sleep. The body is already warmed, already relaxed, already in the right biochemical state. Within minutes, consciousness fades again. But before we follow them into that second sleep, let's linger here for a moment in the quiet midnight manner. All around us, in their various sleeping spaces, servants are experiencing this ancient pattern of rest. Some are tending small duties. Some are praying. Some are simply lying in comfortable awareness. The darkness holds them all gently, without judgment or demand. In our modern world, we've lost this experience. When we wake in the middle of the night, we panic. We check the clock, calculate how many hours until the alarm, worry about being tired tomorrow. We consider sleep medication. We scroll through our phones, flooding our eyes with blue light that disrupts our natural rhythms further. We've forgotten that midnight waking was once normal, expected, even valued. But here in the Tudor Manor, in the darkness that smells of smoke and wool and human life, the servants know a different way. They rest in two stages, separated by this peaceful interlude. And in doing so, they connect to something ancient in human experience. A rhythm that governed sleep for thousands of years before electric lights convinced us that darkness should be conquered rather than inhabited. The fire, Margaret, stoked, is burning well now, casting faint orange light across the kitchen below the loft. She climbs back up the ladder carefully, settles onto her pallet, and within moments is asleep again. Around the manor, other servants are making similar transitions, sliding from their midnight waking back into the embrace of slumber. The night deepens. The manor is quiet save for the small sounds of sleep breathing, occasional shift of position, the creak of timber adjusting to temperature. And as the servants enter their second sleep, something changes in the quality of their rest. This second descent into unconsciousness has a different character. Deeper in some ways, more dream-filled, carrying them toward morning with a different biological purpose. In the stillness between first and second sleep, the Tudor Manor exists in a state unlike any other time of day. It's not quite waking, not quite sleeping, a threshold space, liminal and strange, where the normal rules don't quite apply. The darkness here is almost complete, but not quite. Where there's moonlight tan tonight, the moon is a waning crescent. Thin, but present, it filters through whatever cracks it can find. A sliver of silver light falls across a corridor floor. Another touches the edge of a wooden beam in the dormitory, making it glow faintly. These small illuminations do little to dispel the darkness, but they remind the waking servants that the world outside still exists, still turns on its axis, still follows its ancient courses. Let's spend time in this unusual hour, understanding what it meant to the servants and how they experienced this quiet interval. Sarah is awake now. Has been for perhaps 20 minutes. She lies on her back, hands resting on her stomach, feeling the rise and fall of her own breathing. The kitchen loft is warmer than it was when she first fell asleep, the heat from the fire below. It's had hours to rise and accumulate. She's comfortable in a way that's rare, her body neither too hot nor too cold. Her palate having shaped itself to her form over months of use. She thinks about nothing in particular, which is itself unusual. During waking hours, her mind is constantly occupied with tasks, with the immediate demands of work. Even her brief rest periods during the day are colored by awareness of what comes next, what needs doing. But here in the midnight waking, there's a spaciousness to her thoughts. They can wander without purpose, without destination. She remembers her father dead now 3 years from a fever that took him in just 2 days. She rarely has time to grieve properly, to sit with the loss. But in this quiet darkness, memory surfaces without pain. She recalls his hands, rough and scarred from his work as a carpenter. She remembers the way he would lift her when she was small, swinging her up onto his shoulders so she could see the fair in the nearby town. The memory is vivid, almost tangible, and she lets herself stay with it for a while, neither pulling it closer nor pushing it away. This is what the midnight waking offers: emotional space. Time to process feelings that have nowhere else to go. In a life defined by service, by meeting others' needs, this hour becomes precious for its very purposelessness. In the stable loft, Thomas is also awake, but his midnight waking has a different quality. He's been thinking about the new mare that arrived yesterday, trying to assess her temperament. She's nervous, skittish, probably not treated well by her previous owner. Thomas knows horses, knows them better than he knows people, really, and he's formulating a plan for earning her trust. He'll move slowly around her. He'll let her set the pace of interaction. He'll bring her extra apples from the kitchen when he can manage it. These thoughts organize themselves calmly in his mind, a kind of meditation on horse behavior and trust. He also needs to urinate. He considers his options. There's a chamber pot at the bottom of the loft ladder, but reaching it means climbing down, which feels like more effort than he wants to make. Instead, he moves to the opening in the loft wall, the one that looks out over the fields behind the stable. This is where he sometimes relieves himself during midnight wakings, careful to aim outward so nothing splashes back. It's practical, not exactly dignified. The cold night air rushes in through the opening when he unlatches it, startling in its intensity. He can see his breath clouding in the faint moonlight. He completes his business quickly and relatches the opening. But the cold air has altered the atmosphere of the loft. It feels cleaner now, fresher. And he appreciates this even as he hurries back under his blankets to reclaim warmth. Below him, the horses shift and breathe in the darkness. He knows each one by sound, the gray gelding that stamps when he dreams, the old chestnut mare who whickers softly to herself, the young colt who's still learning to sleep through the night without restlessness. Their presence is comforting to Thomas. He slept among horses for so long that sleeping in a silent room would probably keep him awake. In the corridor alcove is one of the serving men. His name is John, and he's been in service here for 20 years. Wakes during his midnight interval and finds his mind turning to darker thoughts. His back has been troubling him lately, a chronic pain that gets worse each year. He's 42 years old, which is not young for a servant doing physical labor. He knows men who've been turned out when their bodies failed them, left to beg or to rely on parish charity. The thought frightens him more than he admits during daylight hours, but here in the darkness, with no one to see weakness, he allows himself to feel the fear. His hands tremble slightly as he rubs his lower back, trying to ease the constant ache. He thinks about the future with a kind of dread that would be impossible to acknowledge in waking hours when there's work to be done. Appearances to maintain, yet even this dark contemplation has a quality different from daytime anxiety. There's something about the darkness, the quiet, the knowledge that he's not alone in being awake at this hour, that makes the fear feel less overwhelming. He can acknowledge it, sit with it, and eventually let it pass without being consumed by it. His companion, sleeping nearby, suddenly speaks without warning. "You awake, John?" John nearly jumps, startled. "I couldn't sleep through if I tried with your snoring." Soft laugh in the darkness. "My snoring? You're like a sawmill yourself." "You are." This casual conversation, whispered in the night, is typical of the midnight waking period. There's no obligation to speak, but when servants find themselves simultaneously awake, these small exchanges often happen. They're intimate in a particular way. The darkness and the quiet time make it easier to be honest, to be vulnerable, to say things that daylight makes difficult. "Back troubling you again?" the other man asks, his voice softer now, genuinely concerned. Every night lately. Should ask the mistress for some of that liniment she uses. Might help. Maybe. They fall silent again, but it's a comfortable silence, shared between men who've worked side by side for years. Eventually, without further conversation, both drift back toward sleep in the upper servants' quarters. Where conditions are slightly better, the midnight waking takes on different characteristics. Eleanor, the cook, wakes in her small cottage and lies thinking about the next day's menu. She has a guest dinner too. Prepare the master is hosting a neighbor and his family. She mentally reviews her stores, the preserved meats, the root vegetables in the cellar, the herbs hanging dried in the kitchen. She considers what dishes will impress without being too elaborate, what can be prepared partially ahead, so she's not overwhelmed tomorrow. This kind of practical contemplation is common during midnight waking. The mind, freed from the immediate pressures of execution, can actually plan more effectively. Eleanor solves several logistical problems lying in her bed that she might have struggled with during the day's chaos. She decides on the menu, mentally assigns tasks to her kitchen staff, and feels the satisfaction of having organized something complex. But her midnight waking also includes something else, a moment of pride. She's good at what she does. She knows it. Her position as cook represents decades of learning, of working her way up from scullery maid to her current status. She owns this cottage, modest as it is. She has authority, respect, a measure of security. Lying in the darkness, she allows herself to feel successful in a way that humility and propriety prevent during waking hours. William, The page experiences his midnight waking differently from the others because of his proximity to the master. When he wakes, his first thought is always listening. Is the master awake? Does he need something? Tonight, he hears nothing concerning, just the distant sound of the master's snoring. Regular and deep. Freed from immediate duty, William lets his mind wander to more imaginative territory. He's 17, old enough to think about his future. He won't be a page forever soon, he'll age out of the role. He might be promoted to something better within the household, might be given responsibilities that lead somewhere. Or he might be let go, expected to find service elsewhere, starting over with unfamiliar people in an unfamiliar place. He imagines different futures. In one, he becomes a steward himself eventually, managing an entire household, wearing better clothes, having his own chamber. In another, he leaves service entirely, though he's not sure what he would do instead. Perhaps learn a trade? But he has no family to apprentice him, no connections beyond this household. The uncertainty is both frightening and exciting. He also thinks about Anne, one of the young maids. He's noticed her lately, the way she moves, the quick smile she gave him yesterday when they passed in the corridor. He barely knows her, has never had a real conversation with her beyond polite greetings. But in the privacy of his midnight waking, he allows himself to imagine scenarios. Conversations where he's witty and charming, situations where he helps her with some task and she's grateful. It's fantasy, harmless. A way for a young mind to explore feelings that have no other outlet. These romantic thoughts are not uncommon during midnight wakings. For servants whose lives are constrained by duty and hierarchy, whose opportunities for actual courtship are limited, the imagination becomes a space of freedom. Fantasies and daydreams flourish in the darkness, providing emotional outlets that waking life often denies. In the dormitory, the largest concentration of servants experiences a range of midnight activities. Some lie quiet and still. Some pray, lips moving silently, working through memorized prayers, or speaking directly to God in their own words. Some think about families far away, about homes they left as children, about whether they'll ever return. Two of the younger maids, Anne and Catherine, whispered to each other across the narrow space between their pallets. They're talking about the household's young heir, a boy of 15 who will someday inherit the estate. Anne thinks he's handsome. Catherine thinks he's spoiled and annoying. They giggle quietly, careful not to wake the others, their voices barely audible. "You wouldn't know what to do with a lord's son anyway," Catherine whispers. "Neither would you." Anne responds, mock offended. "True enough. Give me a nice farmer's boy any day. Someone who works with his hands. Like Thomas in the stables." "Shush, he'll hear you. He's not even in this room, you fool." More quiet giggling. These moments of levity, of youth expressing itself despite circumstances, are precious. They remind us that servants were still human, still young people with all the feelings and foolishness youth entails, but not all midnight wakings are peaceful or pleasant. Margaret, a maid in her 30s, lies awake feeling the particular loneliness that sometimes surfaces in the night. She has no family, her parents are dead, her siblings scattered to service in other households. She's not close to the other servants, not by choice, but by circumstance. She's older than most, not included in the whispered conversations of the younger girls, not quite equal to the upper servants. In the darkness, she feels this isolation acutely. During the day, work distracts from it. But here, awake while others sleep, or awake in silence while others whisper together, she feels profoundly alone. There's no solution to this feeling, no way to make it better in the moment. She simply has to endure it. Knowing that second sleep will eventually come and provide temporary escape, this too is part of the midnight waking experience. The surfacing of difficult emotions that daylight suppresses. For some servants, this time becomes painful rather than peaceful. But even in the pain, there's something valuable about the acknowledgement. About not running from feeling, about letting emotions exist without immediate need to fix or change them. The sounds of the manor during these midnight hours are worth noting. The building itself makes noise, timber expanding and contracting with temperature changes, creating creaks and pops that sound almost like footsteps. wind finding gaps in walls and whistling through them. Small animals in the walls, mice primarily scratching and scurrying. These sounds would be terrifying to someone unfamiliar with them, but the servants know them all, can identify each one without conscious thought. Occasionally, there are human sounds beyond the sleeping quarters. A member of the family moving about, perhaps having their own midnight waking. Though they would understand it differently, might call it insomnia rather than natural sleep pattern. Sometimes the sound of a door opening, footsteps in a distant corridor. These sounds cause a ripple of alert attention through any servants who hear them as something wrong. Someone needing service? Should they respond? But usually the sounds pass without requiring action. Someone visiting the privy. Someone getting a drink of water. Someone unable to sleep and walking to ease their restlessness. The servants listen, assess, return to their own rest. The duration of this midnight waking varies, as mentioned earlier, but there seems to be a collective sense of when it's time to return to sleep. Perhaps it's simply that bodies naturally want to complete their rest cycle. Perhaps it's unconscious awareness of the passage of time, even without clocks. But gradually, over the course of half an hour to 2 hours, the awake servants begin settling back toward sleep. Thoughts slow. Breathing deepens. The body finds its final position for the night, or rather, for the second sleep. The darkness seems to grow more complete. Perhaps consciousness of it fades as awareness turns inward toward dreams and rest. And one by one, in their various spaces throughout the manor, the servants slip back into sleep. Not all at once, some fall asleep quickly, while others linger in drowsy half-awareness for a while longer. But the general movement is toward unconsciousness, toward the second phase of the night's rest. As they fade back into sleep, the manor returns to its deepest quiet. The midnight waking is ending. The threshold hour is closing. And what awaits them now is different from the first sleep, deeper in some ways. Stranger, more populated with dreams and visions. The second sleep carries them toward morning, but by a different path. Through different terrain of consciousness, the fire in the kitchen hearth burns steadily now. The logs Margaret added during her midnight waking transformed into glowing coals. That warmth rises through the floor, keeping the kitchen loft comfortable. In the stables, the horses have settled into their own deep sleep, their large bodies radiating heat upward to where Thomas lies buried in hay. Throughout the manor, in corridors and lofts and tiny chambers, the servants are surrendering again to rest. And in this surrender, there's a kind of trust that morning will come, that bodies will wake when needed, that the fragmented rest they receive will somehow be enough. It has to be enough. There's no alternative. So they sleep again, letting the second portion of night claim them, carrying them forward toward dawn and another day of labor. The transition into second sleep is gentler than the descent into first sleep. Bodies are already warmed, already relaxed, already conditioned for rest. The servants don't fight this transition, they welcome it. Letting consciousness slip away like a boat drifting from shore, Sarah feels it happening, feels her thoughts becoming less coherent, feels her awareness of the kitchen loft and the other servants fading into something softer, more distant. Her breathing slows, naturally deepens. Her muscles release tension she didn't know she was holding, and then she's asleep again, crossing that invisible boundary between waking and dreaming without marking the exact moment. This second sleep has different qualities than the first. For one thing, it's shorter, perhaps 3 hours instead of 4, lasting from roughly 1 or 2 in the morning until just before dawn. But it's also deeper in certain ways, more populated with dreams, carrying the sleeper through different stages of consciousness. The body's restoration work continues, but with different emphases. Where first sleep focused on physical repair, healing muscle tissue, processing nutrients, clearing metabolic waste, second sleep leans more toward mental and emotional processing. This is when dreams become vivid, when the mind sorts through the day's experiences, when memories consolidate and emotions find expression in symbolic form. Sarah dreams. She's walking through a forest, not any forest she knows in waking life, but a dream forest that feels simultaneously familiar and strange. The trees are enormous, their trunks wider than houses, their branches meeting high overhead to create a canopy that filters light into green-gold dimness. She's looking for something, though she doesn't know what. There's a sense of purpose, of important task, but also a dreamlike acceptance that she doesn't need to understand fully. She encounters people in this forest. Her mother, who in waking life lives in a cottage 10 miles away. But in the dream, her mother is younger, wearing a dress Sarah remembers from childhood. They embrace, and Sarah feels overwhelming relief, though she doesn't know what she was relieved about. Her mother speaks, but Sarah can't hear the words, or perhaps can hear them, but immediately forgets them. It doesn't matter. The feeling of connection is what matters. The dream shifts the way dreams do, without logical transition. Now she's in the manor kitchen, but it's different, larger, brighter, filled with food she's never seen before. She's preparing a feast, but her hands move without her conscious direction, effortlessly creating elaborate dishes. She feels competent, powerful, creative in ways her waking life never allows. The dream offers a kind of mastery, a fantasy of skill that provides psychological compensation for the daily experience of being. Bottom-level staff. Not all the servants' second sleep dreams are pleasant. John, the serving man with the aching back, dreams of falling. It's a common anxiety dream. He's standing on a high wall, and suddenly, the stones beneath his feet crumble. He's falling, and he wakes with a sharp intake of breath, heart pounding. Before realizing he's safe on his pallet in the corridor. The dream's meaning isn't subtle his fears about his failing body, about falling from his position, about having no safety net. But he doesn't analyze it consciously. He simply calms his breathing, notes that it's still dark, and lets himself drift back into sleep. Thomas dreams of horses, as he often does. In his dream, he's riding the new mare who arrived yesterday. But she's not nervous or skittish. She's confident, powerful, responding to his slightest touch. They're galloping across open fields faster than any real horse could run. And Thomas feels a joy so intense it's almost painful. The dream gives him what reality doesn't: a perfect partnership with the animals he cares for. A sense of freedom and power that his waking life as a stable hand can never provide. William's dreams during second sleep often have a quality of advancement and achievement. Tonight, he dreams he's been promoted to steward. He's wearing fine clothes, speaking with authority to the other servants. The master treats him as an equal, asking his opinion on household matters. In the dream, William feels the satisfaction of earned respect, of status that comes from his own merits. When he eventually wakes, the return to reality, to being a page, lowest tier of personal servants, will be disappointing. But for now, the dream provides what his psyche needs: validation, hope, a vision of possible futures. The science of dreaming wasn't understood in Tudor times, of course. Dreams were interpreted through religious and folk belief frameworks. Some dreams were thought to be messages from God containing important warnings or guidance. Other dreams were attributed to demons or evil spirits trying to corrupt the soul. Still others were seen as simple reflections of daily life, meaningless mental noise. But regardless of interpretation, everyone dreamed, and second sleep was particularly rich with dream activity. The servants would sometimes discuss their dreams the next day during work, comparing notes, offering interpretations, seeking meaning in the symbolic language their minds created during sleep. Some dreams recurred. Sarah often dreams of water, rivers, wells, rain. Given that her waking hours involve constant interaction with water, fetching it, heating it, using it for cleaning, this isn't surprising. But the dream water has qualities real water doesn't. Sometimes it's luminous, glowing from within. Sometimes it speaks with human voices. Sometimes she can breathe underwater, swimming down into depths that should terrify her, but don't. These recurring dreams become familiar. Landmarks in her interior landscape, she knows them, recognizes them when they appear, sometimes can even guide them slightly, choosing to swim deeper or to surface, though never with full lucidity. They're like old friends, strange but welcome. Not all of second sleep is dream-filled. There are periods of deeper, dreamless sleep even in this phase. The brain cycles through different stages. moving from light sleep to deep sleep to REM dream-rich sleep in roughly 90-minute patterns. Servants experience all these stages, though they have no names for them. No conscious awareness of the cycling. What they do know is that some nights the sleep feels more restful than others. Some nights they wake in the morning feeling reasonably refreshed. Other mornings they wake feeling as tired as when they went to bed, as if the night provided no rest at all. They don't understand why the difference between getting enough deep sleep versus spending too much time in lighter stages. The impact of environmental disturbances on sleep quality. The role of stress and worry in preventing restorative sleep. The environmental challenges continue through second sleep. The cold that relented slightly during the warmer. First sleep period returns with intensity in the hours before dawn, traditionally the coldest part of night. Servants curl tighter under their blankets, sometimes waking partially from the cold and having to adjust their covering or position before sleep reclaims them in the dormitory. One of the younger maids wakes, shivering. The blanket she shares with the girl next to her has been pulled away. Her companion is a restless sleeper who rolls and thrashes, stealing more than her share of covering. The cold has woken her fully now, and she tugs the blanket back, trying to reclaim warmth. Her companion mutters something in sleep but doesn't wake. Balance restored, the shivering girl lies still, waiting for warmth to return, and gradually slides back into sleep. These micro-wakings are common throughout second sleep. They're not the deliberate, natural midnight waking. They're brief disruptions caused by discomfort or disturbance. Most of the time, the servants don't even remember them the next day. They wake, adjust, return to sleep within moments. The entire episode barely registering in memory. Animals contribute their own disturbances. In the stables, a horse has a nightmare. Horses dream and can be disturbed by dreams and kicks violently against the stall wall. The sound is loud, sudden, startling. Thomas wakes instantly, alert, listening for follow-up sounds that might indicate injury or danger. But the horse settles quickly, was just momentarily distressed. Thomas lies back down, waits for his heart rate to slow, and within minutes is asleep again. The manor's cats are active during these hours. Cats are nocturnal hunters, and the night is when they patrol for mice and rats. The servants sometimes wake to the sound of a cat's hunting cry, a distinctive chirrup or chattering sound cats make when they spot prey. Or they wake to the sounds of a chase rapid paws on wooden floors, the scramble of a mouse trying to escape. Sometimes the quiet crunch of a successful kill. These sounds are so common they barely disturb sleep. The servants have learned to process them unconsciously, assessing whether the sound requires attention and dismissing it if it doesn't, all without fully waking. This is a skill developed over time, the ability to sleep lightly enough to respond to genuine emergencies, while ignoring routine nighttime sounds. As second sleep progresses toward dawn, the quality of consciousness begins to shift. The sleep remains deep, but there's an unconscious awareness that morning approaches. Bodies begin subtle preparation for waking, hormone levels shift, brain activity gradually increases. Sleep becomes progressively lighter in anticipation of the coming day. Sarah's dreaming becomes more vivid, and sometimes more anxious as dawn approaches. She dreams she's late for something, rushing through corridors that keep changing their layout, unable to find what she's looking for. She dreams she's broken something valuable. Ceramic Gigant is trying desperately to hide the pieces before she's discovered. These anxiety dreams reflect her waking concerns, her fear of making mistakes, of being punished, of failing to meet expectations. But even these anxious dreams aren't nightmares in the full sense. They're uncomfortable but not terrifying. They process worry without becoming traumatic, and they fade quickly once she wakes. She remembers a sense of having dreamed something stressful, but won't retain the specific details. William, in his small chamber, dreams of home, though home is a complicated concept for him. He was sent into service at age 9, has spent more of his life in this manner than in his family's cottage. But sometimes he dreams of that cottage, of his mother's voice, of siblings whose faces he's half forgotten. These dreams carry a melancholy tone, a mourning for a childhood that was brief and is now irretrievable. He wakes from them feeling vaguely sad without quite knowing why. The spiritual dimension of Tudor life colors their dreams too. Religious imagery appears, frequently crosses, churches, priests, saints. Sometimes the dreams carry theological weight, grappling with questions of salvation and damnation, worthiness and sin. Other times, religious symbols appear more randomly, without particular meaning, simply because they're such a central part of waking consciousness that they naturally populate dreams as well. Margaret dreams of confession. She's in a church, kneeling before a priest in the confessional booth, trying to confess her sins. But when she opens her mouth, she can't speak. No sound comes out, or perhaps the wrong words emerge, words she didn't intend. The priest looks disappointed, shakes his head. She feels overwhelming shame in the dream, a sense of having failed spiritually. This dream reflects her real-life anxieties about her standing with God, about whether she's living righteously enough, about whether her daily labor counts as sufficient devotion, as the second sleep draws toward its end. The servants' bodies begin waking preparations without conscious intent. Breathing patterns change. Muscle tone increases slightly. The sleeper shifts position more frequently. It's not yet dawn, but the body knows it's coming, can sense it somehow, perhaps through subtle changes in temperature, perhaps through biological rhythms that track time even without external cues. The dreams become more fragmented, more easily disturbed. Sarah half-wakes several times in the last hour of her second sleep, briefly aware of the kitchen loft, of the darkness starting to pale slightly, before sleep reclaims her for a few more minutes. Each of these partial wakings is brief, barely qualifying as waking at all, but they mark the transition from deep sleep toward morning consciousness. And then, without any dramatic shift, without alarm or announcement, the servants begin to wake for real. It's not simultaneous, some wake 5 or 10 minutes before others, but within a rough window, as the first gray light of pre-dawn begins to filter through gaps in shutters and around door frames, the servants transition from second sleep to waking for some. This waking is gradual, a slow surfacing from dreams, an awareness building gently over minutes. For others, it's more abrupt, eyes opening suddenly, full consciousness arriving almost instantly. There's no one right way to wake, and each servant has their own pattern. Developed over years of this same routine, Sarah opens her eyes to darkness that's beginning to lighten. She can just barely make out the shapes of the other pallets around her, the forms of the other servants beginning to stir. Her body aches in new ways, the particular stiffness that comes from lying in one position too long, the cold that settles into joints overnight. But she's awake, consciousness returned, and duty calls. She doesn't leap up immediately. There are a few moments, precious moments, where she can lie still, aware but not yet acting. She assesses her body, her energy level, her readiness for the day. She stretches slightly, feeling her spine crack and realign. She takes a deep breath, preparing mentally for what comes next. Around her, the other servants are going through similar transitions. Margaret sits up, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders against the cold. Thomas, in the stable loft, is already climbing down the ladder. The horses are waiting, and his sense of duty to them overrides any lingering desire for rest. The second sleep is ending. Morning is arriving, inevitably, as it always does. And with it comes the return to duty, to labor, to the endless cycle of tasks that define servant life, but they've had their rest fragmented, interrupted, shaped by circumstances not of their choosing, but rest nonetheless. The two-phase sleep pattern has carried them through the night, providing what restoration it could within the constraints of their lives. Their bodies are ready, or as ready as they'll be for another day. The manor is waking too. Somewhere in the family quarters, someone is stirring, beginning their own slower, more luxurious morning routine. But the servants are awake first, as they always are, preparing the manor for the day, ensuring that by the time the family properly wakes, everything will be ready, comfortable, warm. This is the cycle. This is the pattern. Sleep and wake. Work and rest. Day flowing into night, and night into day. The servants' sleep schedules, they're forgotten. Fragmented patterns are woven into this larger rhythm, shaped by it and shaping it in return, And now, as dawn truly begins to break, we can look at how the seasons changed everything. How summer and winter imposed their own demands. How nature's cycles shaped sleep in ways we've barely touched on yet. The year turns, slowly and inevitably. The manor that Sarah knows in November is not quite the same manor she inhabits in June. The stones are the same, the timber unchanged, but the experience of living within those walls transforms with the seasons. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the patterns of rest. Let's begin in the depths of winter January. Perhaps when the days are shortest and the nights stretch endlessly, dawn comes late, if it comes at all in any meaningful sense. The sun rises around 8 in the morning, and by 4 in the afternoon, it's setting again. Darkness claims 16 hours of every day. And this darkness fundamentally reshapes how the servants sleep in summer. Servants might retire to their sleeping spaces around 9 or 10 in the evening, staying awake as long as useful light permits. But in winter, as darkness falls in mid-afternoon, the calculations change. There's no point in burning expensive candles or tallow for activities that don't require light. There's no point in sitting awake in cold, dark spaces. So the servants begin their first sleep earlier, sometimes as early as 7 in the evening. It's just an hour or two after the evening meal. This early retirement means longer sleep overall. The first sleep might last 4 or even 5 hours. The midnight waking extends because there are so many hours of darkness to fill. And the second sleep carries them through to a dawn that arrives late enough that they're actually well rested when it comes, paradoxically. Winter, despite its hardships, sometimes offers servants better sleep than other seasons. Yes, the cold is intense, the darkness oppressive. But the early sunsets force rest in a way that lighter seasons don't. The body has time to complete its full sleep cycles. Without being cut short by dawn arriving too, early Sarah lies on her pallet in the kitchen loft on a January night. And even at 7:30 in the evening, it's been dark for over an hour. The day's work is done as much as it's going to be. The evening meal has been prepared and served and cleaned up. There are no evening tasks that make sense in the darkness, no garden work. No outdoor repairs, no activities that require good vision. So she sleeps, letting the long winter night embrace her. The cold, though, is relentless. In her summer sleeping, Sarah might use only a single light blanket. But in January, she's buried under 2 heavy woolen blankets, wearing her day shift in a wool cap, her feet wrapped in extra cloth. Even with these precautions, the cold finds ways in. The floor beneath her pallet radiates chill upward. The air she breathes is cold enough to sting her nostrils. When she shifts position, the blankets move, and cold air rushes into the warm cocoon she's created, making her gasp and curl tighter. The kitchen fire helps the hearth below never fully goes out in winter, maintained constantly to prevent the enormous difficulty of relighting it from scratch. That warmth rises through the floorboards, making the kitchen loft one of the warmer servant sleeping spaces. But even so, true comfort is impossible. The servants sleep not in warmth, but in a kind of negotiated truce with cold, where they're not quite freezing, but never quite warm either. The midnight waking in winter has a different character. When Sarah wakes naturally around midnight, she's immediately aware of the cold on her face, the only part of her exposed. Her body, underneath the blankets, is reasonably warm, heated by its own metabolism and the trapped air in her clothing and bedding. But her face and the air she breathes are shockingly cold. She's reluctant to move during this midnight waking. Moving means exposing more of her body to the cold. It means losing the careful arrangement of blankets that's keeping her tolerable. So she lies very still, thinking her thoughts, saying her prayers, but not rising to tend fires or complete small tasks as she might in warmer seasons. Only dire necessity, a desperate need for the chamber. Pot could force her out from under the blankets. During a winter midnight waking, this immobility during the midnight waking changes its psychological quality. In warmer months, the midnight waking might include gentle physical activity, getting up to tend a fire, moving around the sleeping space, perhaps stepping outside to look at stars. But in winter, the waking becomes purely mental, purely interior. The body stays still, while the mind alone moves through its thoughts and prayers. It's more meditative, more contemplative, less connected to physical space. The winter midnight waking also tends to be shorter. In summer's mild nights, servants might remain in the waking state for an hour or even 2. Comfortable enough that returning to sleep isn't urgent. But in winter, the cold encourages a quicker return to sleep. 20 minutes, maybe 30, and then the pullback toward unconsciousness becomes irresistible. Both because the body wants more sleep, and because sleep is the only true escape from cold awareness. Thomas, in the stable loft, experiences winter nights differently than summer ones. The horses below generate significant heat. Their large bodies are living furnaces, warming the stable to temperatures far above the outdoor air. The loft above them benefits enormously from this warmth. Thomas might be more comfortable in winter than Sarah in the kitchen loft. Despite the general assumption that houses are warmer than stables, but the horses themselves require more attention in winter. They need feeding more frequently to maintain body temperature. Their water freezes and must be replaced multiple times per day. The stable requires more maintenance to prevent drafts and retain heat. So while Thomas's sleeping space is relatively comfortable, his waking duties are more demanding. And this affects his sleep patterns. He wakes more frequently during winter nights, responding to sounds from the horses below. A horse shifting restlessly might mean it's too cold, or its water has frozen, or it's somehow in distress. Thomas has learned to distinguish these sounds in his sleep, waking only when something seems wrong and ignoring normal nighttime horse sounds. But this partial vigilance means his sleep is lighter, less restorative, even though he's getting more hours of it. Now let's shift forward in time. Imagining the same manor house in June, the transformation is remarkable. Dawn comes early, sometimes before 4 in the morning, sky lightening, while most servants are still deep in their second sleep. By 5, it's fully light, and by 6, the sun is well above the horizon, promising another long day. Summer nights or short darkness doesn't fall until after 9 in the evening, sometimes closer to 10. This compression of nighttime hours fundamentally changes sleep patterns. There simply isn't time for the leisurely progression of early retirement. Long first sleep, extended midnight waking, long second sleep, everything must compress to fit into the available darkness. Sarah doesn't retire to the kitchen loft until perhaps 9:30 on a June evening. She's been working in daylight until just minutes before outdoor tasks. Garden work, activities that make sense to complete while light lasts. She comes to bed later, already tired from a longer working day, falls asleep quickly. But her first sleep is shorter, perhaps 3 hours instead of 4. She wakes around 12:30 or 1, and even in the darkness, there's a quality to the air that speaks of brief night. She can sense somehow that dawn isn't far away, that the darkness is temporary. Her midnight waking is rushed, compressed, perhaps only 15 or 20 minutes before her body pulls her back towards second sleep, and that second sleep is shorter too. Maybe only 2 or 3 hours before the early dawn light begins filtering into the kitchen loft, waking her earlier than in winter. She's had less total sleep, perhaps 6 or 7 hours, instead of 9 or 10. And yet the work demands of summer are actually higher than winter. This is one of the great challenges of servant life in summer. The longer days mean more work. Gardens need tending. Harvests need bringing in. Outdoor maintenance projects proceed while weather permits. But the shorter nights mean less sleep, creating a deficit that accumulates over the summer months. Servants become chronically tired, surviving on less rest than their bodies really need. Enduring because there's no alternative, the temperature shifts create different challenges. Summer sleeping spaces that were merely cold in winter become stifling in summer. The kitchen loft, so desirable in January for its warmth, becomes oppressive in June. The heat from below, once welcome, now makes the space almost unbearable. The same insulation that kept cold out now traps heat in, creating an environment more suited to baking than sleeping. Sarah lies on her pallet on a hot June night, wearing only her lightest shift, with no blanket at all, and still she sweats. The air is thick, humid, barely moving, despite the small openings that provide ventilation. The air is thick, humid, barely moving despite the small openings that provide ventilation. She can hear the other servants around her, all of them restless, shifting position frequently. Seeking any slight improvement in comfort, sleep comes less easily in these conditions. Her body needs to cool slightly to descend into proper sleep, but the environment prevents this. She lies in a state of uncomfortable half-sleep, drifting toward unconsciousness, but never quite achieving the deep rest she needs. When she does sleep, it's light and easily disturbed, and she wakes frequently throughout the night, each time finding herself sweaty and uncomfortable. The servants develop strategies for summer sleeping. They take their pallets outside on the hottest nights, sleeping in courtyards or gardens, where at least there might be a breeze. They dampen cloths and drape them over their bodies, the evaporation providing brief cooling. They sleep as far from each other as possible, avoiding the additional heat of other bodies nearby. But these strategies only partially mitigate the challenge. Summer sleep for servants is simply difficult, less restorative, more fragmented than winter sleep. And the shorter nights mean there's less time to attempt rest. It's even imperfect rest. The seasonal variation also affects the midnight waking in interesting ways. In summer, this waking period sometimes includes outdoor time. Servants step outside. During their midnight waking, escaping the close air of their sleeping spaces, enjoying the relative cool of night air. They might sit in a courtyard, looking at stars, feeling breeze on their skin. These moments become precious brief periods of comfort and peace in otherwise challenging conditions. Thomas, in the stable loft, finds summer nights less comfortable than winter ones, despite the pleasant temperature. The heat makes the smell of horses and manure more intense, almost overwhelming. The flies that are minor nuisances during the day become serious irritants at night, buzzing around, landing on exposed skin. The horses themselves are more restless. In summer heat, shifting and stamping more frequently, their movements disturbing his sleep. He adapts by leaving the loft opening unlatched through the night, allowing maximum air circulation. But this means early light wakes him dawn coming in through the opening as early as 4 in the morning. It's making it impossible to continue sleeping even if you wanted to. The transitions between season spring and autumn bring their own particular challenges. Spring is unpredictable, with temperatures varying wildly from night to night. Servants might go to sleep with winter weight blankets and wake sweating, or might fall asleep in mild evening air only to wake shivering in early morning cold. This unpredictability makes proper rest difficult. The body can't fully adapt to conditions that change constantly. Autumn brings relief from summer's heat, but also anxiety about approaching winter. Servants know the cold is coming, know the challenges it will bring. There's psychological pressure to complete various preparations before deep winter arrives, stockpiling firewood, making repairs to sleeping spaces, ensuring blankets are in good condition. This anxiety can interfere with sleep, even as the temperature becomes more conducive to rest. The harvest season in autumn brings its own sleep disruptions. This is the busiest agricultural period, when crops must be brought in before weather destroys them. Servants may work from before dawn to after dark, with the entire household mobilized for harvest activities. Sleep during these weeks becomes minimal, snatched in brief intervals, barely adequate. Servants endure this period knowing it's temporary, knowing that once harvest is complete, the rhythm will ease. It's worth noting that the wealthy family, living in the manor's main quarters, also experiences seasonal variation in sleep, but with far more ability to adapt. In summer, they might retreat to cooler rooms, ones that don't face the afternoon sun. In winter, they have multiple fireplaces, keeping their chambers warm, better bedding, and more of it. Have the option to stay in bed longer if they choose. Their seasonal sleep challenges are more about preference and minor discomfort than about genuine hardship. But for the servants, seasonal variation in sleep is dramatic and demanding. Summer brings compressed sleep in difficult conditions. Winter brings extended but cold rest. Spring and autumn bring unpredictability. Each season requires adaptation, requires finding ways to rest adequately despite environmental challenges. And yet, there's something remarkable in how the servants' bodies adapt to these cycles. Year after year of living through the same seasonal changes creates a kind of attunement. Bodies learn to prepare for winter sleep patterns, learn to survive on less rest in summer, learn to adapt quickly during transitional seasons. This adaptation is unconscious, biological, a testament to human resilience. As we watch the year turn through the manor's sleeping spaces, from winter's long dark nights to summer's brief darkness and back again, we see servants negotiating constantly with their environment, with duty, with their own physical needs. Sleep is never simple or easy, but it happens, somehow. Rest is found, somehow. The bodies endure, year after year, adapting to demands that would seem impossible if described in advance, but become simply life, simply the way things are, when lived day by day and night by night. The seasons will continue their turn, inevitable and indifferent. And the servants will continue sleeping through them, their rest shaped by forces beyond their control, but their persistence unbroken. Finding ways to survive, and even to thrive in circumstances we can barely imagine.